Good morning, everybody. Okay, it's good the system. Can you hear everybody? Yeah. So, good morning, esteemed guests, speakers, and attendees. My name is Miguel Alexandre Barreiro. I am the moderator of this event. This is an event of the International Atomic Energy Agency within the Blue Pavilion, and we will discuss about the significance of nuclear technologies and techniques in climate adaptation process, with a specific focus on agriculture, food security, water management, and livestock. We have as a panelist Dr. Najat Mortar, that is the Deputy Director General and the head of the Department of Nuclear Science and Applications at the IAEA. We have Dr. Samil Iqbal, the Vice President of Finance at the Islamic Development Bank. We have Dr. Christopher Muller, Professor of Experimental Plant Ecology at the University of Giessen and Professor of Soil Science at the University College of Dublin. And we have Martin Kroos, Director in Technical Cooperation Department at the International Atomic Energy Agency. We had also as a participant Elizabeth Kurmi, Director of Head of Finance, Climate and Energy Transition of City Global Insights of City Group. But unfortunately, I mean, we all aware about the logistics that are not ideal, and she couldn't make it. So in order to embrace this discussion, that is going to be a Davos-style event where all the panelists will engage in a discussion with the specific questions that will be raised by me or even colleagues from the audience at the end of the event. Let's start with our opening remarks from Dr. Najat Mokhtar, Deputy Director General of the IAEA. Thank you very much.
That this works? It does? Good. And very good morning to all of you, and welcome our distinguished guests here, panelists. Very honored to be with you. I think we are in Pavilion of Energy and Finance, so one wonder why we're talking about food and where we're talking about water. And this is the dilemma that we at the IEA were experiencing, that whenever we talk about IEA, we don't think about nuclear technology and what nuclear technology can offer to also contribute to the challenges we globally we are all facing, mainly climate change, but also food insecurity, which is like a vicious cycle. If we tackle climate change, we should also tackle it from food and agriculture side, because we know that is the second contributor to CO2 and to the greenhouse gases. And so we need also then to look at solutions then, because we have more than 800 million people there, they go to bed hungry. So we need to find food to feed people and at the same time save our planet. And I think there is no brainer. We need to find that science and technology is the solution. And science and technology to really harness the soil, because now we are facing drought, we are facing flooding, to really harness to find varieties of crops that they are also strong, and we have new diseases, they can stand also the heat, or they can stand the flooding, high yield. And also water. I'm coming from African countries where water is a big issue. Just near my place, we used to have a nice lake. Now that lake does not exist anymore, which put pressure on the underground water. So which means we are now surface water, which is being gone. We are now looking at underground water, which we don't see, and we are pumping. So we don't know when we won't have any water anymore. And we all see that there are regions without water. And this is where nuclear technology comes in, because nuclear technology has the power. It's technology, it's data, it's science, and this is what we need. We need information. Where is the water, for example? How much is in there? We need science to really find a plant that genetic, that the genes that we can also see, okay, this is the variety that they can stand the heat, this is the variety with high yield. We need science also to look at soil moisture, which I think colleagues here will talk about it. So once we have this data and we have this information and we have these varieties, science, we have these results, we need to move and transfer it to the farmers, to the people. And and the science is with the academia, transfer it to the people is organizations like us with the FAO. And the good thing is that we are teaming up with the FAO. We are having joint program and we are launching joint initiatives like Atom for Food that yesterday both our Director General Grossi and Don Q have also mentioned about atoms for food. We are scaling up the data, the proof of concept that we came up with to together to countries really to ensure food security while dealing with climate change. But at the same time, to do that, scaling up is big word. It's nice, but we need funding. And here is when I'm looking at my friend here next to me, that we need also funding that's used wisely and used in a way that is efficient, results oriented, action oriented. And here where I think us as organization, we are not policy organization, we are technical, we are action, we have proof of concept, we can show that we can do things with countries, we have already results and proof of concept, so we can show at country level, look, in Pakistan, for example, we have come up with these varieties of crops, including cotton, which is very a successful story that's contributed to the economy of the country, and where this variety of cotton that is stand disease, stand heat, and high yield. In China, we contributed to rice security in many countries in Africa, contributed also to new varieties. We're talking about hundreds of varieties, but now we need to work with countries to scale up, move this up, capacity building, train people. And this, I think we cannot do it alone. We need to partner with academia, with finance institutions, with other UN organizations. And I think here where we are is the platform where we need to talk to each other to see how we can work together, because the stick ahead of us, the challenge ahead of us is so big that one alone we cannot tackle it. I stop here. Be happy to contribute to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, DDG, thank you very much for those insightful opening remarks. I think that this, in a way, framed the importance of the agency work in climate adaptation. And also your perspective, it creates a solid foundation for the discussion today. So without further hesitation, I'm moving to our other panelists, because we're going to bring now on this dialogue a different perspective from different organizations, academia, and operational actions. So I would like to give the floor now to our esteemed representative from the Islamic Development Bank, but perhaps with a question to introduce your participation in this dialogue. How, if you could elaborate the role of development organizations and financial institutions, and here I guess, as an example, we can bring the Islamic Development Bank in supporting global research and innovation for food security. And also connected to that question is, how does the Islamic Development Bank, for example, contribute in scaling up sustainable financing for food security transformation, for food system transformation? So over to you, and
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's indeed an honor to be with such a distinguished panelist. Maybe I'll take your first question first about our own organization. You may not have heard much about Islamic Development Bank, but we are 57 member countries, and next year we'll be celebrating our 50th anniversary. So we have been engaged with the development arena for almost 50 years. And that gives us a very rich local knowledge of our 57 member countries. And many of our member countries have a very rich agriculture sector. So we have quite a bit knowledge, if you can say, in that arena. Now, however, over a period of time, and again, unfortunately, given the challenges imposed by the climate, I'm very kind of sad to share with you that out of 57 member countries, 31 member countries are considered as fragile countries, which means they are already very vulnerable. And if something happens, they will become into a much more serious challenges and issues. And that's what we saw with the recent food security issue, which happened after the Ukraine and Russian crisis. And many of our member countries, they were all had to face these sudden challenge. Now, unfortunately, out of that 57 member countries, 29 member countries are IDA recipient, which means they're the least developed countries, which means that they do not have a very good infrastructure. They do not have means. They cannot even borrow funds on a commercial basis. So they need concessional financing. So I think main kind of one of the thing which the approach we are taking, although I think as our colleague said, that we need to coordinate better. And I think we as MDBs, all the multilateral development bank, whether it's Islamic Development Bank or the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, we are all realizing this thing that our own resources are also limited. We also realize that we should need to not replicate what everyone is doing in a solo kind of a style. So there's a big kind of a drive towards having much more coordinated action by all the MDBs together. So that's I think is a positive development. So what we are doing basically is developing, forging partnerships with many of the leading development partners, whether it's IAEA or whether it is other MDBs or whether it is any other foundations. Like for example, we have a very good cooperation with the Gates Foundation, and we have launched a program called Live and Livelihood Fund (LLF), which has been successful. So in that sense, we believe that we can do. Financing alone cannot help. Financing, again, we have two issues. One is that financing alone cannot help. There's not enough financing. MDBs cannot do it alone. So therefore, we need to have partnerships. Okay, and much more coordination. So that is a given, and that's what we would like to do. Now, second thing is, how do we do it, and what do we do it? I think one of the things which we believe that agriculture, we need to change this attitude of agriculture as a way of life, and changing that to more agriculture as sustainable business enterprise. Make it more on a scientific kind of a lines, and maybe that includes, and we are also working on some sort of analysis where we could offer these Islamic insurance to small farm holders, so they can develop some resilience against any unexpected mishap. Yeah, of course. So as from that, that's basically, we're also, again, what our strategy is, or our view is, that we want to establish climate smart agriculture practices. We want to develop sustainable land management practices, and we want to enhance the food production system. So that's what our strategy is. But we do not cannot do it alone. We want to do it with others. And I think in all of this aspect, we are much more cautious. This is part of our new strategy, that we want to make sure that the farmers' welfare is given a priority. One of our part of strategy is human development, and that form of it, we want to make sure that the farmer's well-being, social being, is all taken very care. Now, do you want me to go over the next part, or okay, continue? Fine. Now, how we do or what we do, I think that's the thing. For example, recently, when since last year, we had a issue in food security in many our countries. So we, Islamic Development Bank, with our entities and with our partners, especially like Arab Coordination Group or so, we launched basically program of almost 11 billion US dollars. That 11 billion US dollar is being used for the programs to revive the agriculture sector, revive the new technologies, new techniques. and that we call it a food security response program, and that has been quite successful in that sense. So we did have a respond very quickly. We, as soon as this thing happened, we immediately came into our. I think the other thing which I want to bring to your attention that our shareholding, Islamic Development Bank is a bit unique compared with other MDBs. Our stake shareholding is all south to south. So we do not have any of the big G7 and all these other. So our agenda is not driven by any of those major economies. We are south to south, and we have one program called South to South Cooperation. We call it a reverse linkages. Under this reverse linkages, we believe that those countries in the south who have gained experience, they can transfer that experience to other fellow countries within the south rather than have any dependency on someone else. So that program is very successful. We give technical assistance, grants, concessional lending under that program, and even one south country may give capacity building and knowledge transfer to other South countries. So I think that's quite a bit our uh, other thing. What we when we did recently, we did our because we had a COVID and then we had this food security issue. We looked at our strategy and we revised our strategy. Now going forward, our emphasis is going to be building infrastructure, but which is also resilient and green. Now, this is not an easy task, but again, that is at least our approach is that we want to build resilient and sustainable and green infrastructure. Part of that is human capital development, and since many of our countries are agro-based in the economies, we need to go and thinking of helping them, how we can help with them to them with this. You talked about science technology. We have a separate, a dedicated team called on STI, Science, Technology, and Innovation, which basically tries to engage with the researchers, engage with the knowledge producers, and so forth, and try to see what we could do in this particular arena. So we do recognize that we need to scale up our engagement in the agriculture sector. We also realize that we want to make sure that we use technology to make the crops more resistant to drought and any other thing. I mean, many of our countries, are hit by this climate unfortunate events. Flooding in Pakistan and Libya and other countries, we had this quite a bit damaging. Now, yesterday I heard from two of our member countries, one from Somalia and one from Iraq. They were telling that how in their country they are devastated by this climate change, and that has ruined their agriculture, living, and the livelihood of people. That in Somalia they were saying is that because of the they in 48 hours they got three times their annual rainfall. And that brought so much flooding and destroyed the livelihood, of animals and all. And that has kind of impacted the people. So, in that sense, when we hear these stories, of course, then we go out and we try to help them as much as. And maybe I would try to kind of conclude by saying, in all this thing, we are very cautious. We want to make sure that when we work on any of the food system transformation, we make sure that we give priority to woman empowerment. We want to make sure that in terms of these empowerment, we have a certain gender responsive policies, ensuring that women have equal access to the resources, land ownership, and decision making, and so forth. So I think I will say that as a south to south institution, and we believe in developing partnerships, we really welcome the initiatives by the IAEA, and we believe that some of the technologies which are being promoted by them, we can certainly make good use of them, and our member countries, they can really benefit from the whole, not only this, but to their own sustainable economic development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This has been a very holistic perspective. And since we are in the equator of the event, that's allow us to move now to continue this operational view. Let's have a perspective from a science point of view. And for that, I would like to introduce Professor Muller, because the challenges that pose climate change to food and water systems are immense. And could you discuss how nuclear science and technology can help to address those challenges from this scientific perspective? Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you very much for introducing me and for having me here in this very distinguished panel. Very happy to be able to share some of the science facts. Um, you heard I'm a plant ecologist, and what I usually get as a question, what are you actually doing with the IAEA? They're only dealing with nuclear energy. And then I need to start giving them a lecture on what the IAEA is doing apart from nuclear energy, right? For instance, that the IAEA, without the stable isotope facilities they have and all the calibration standards, we would probably not know nothing about climate change. Because all of these kind of facilities are actually absolutely needed to understand, for instance, ice core measurements, where we actually go back 1 million years ago and things like that, right? That's just a little bit of a start, that I usually have to justify, even in front of politicians sometimes, why I'm actually doing this work. And I think all of us were sitting here, and no sensible person will dispute the fact that climate change is actually happening. And I mean, we're dealing already with an increase of almost 1.2 degrees, man-made increase. And the scientific community is almost certain that we may have difficulties to reach that 1.5 degree target. We are going to talk about it, and we really hope that we can reach that, but it may be actually a little bit tricky. But I mean, we all know, we all feel, we all have good examples of climate change. I mean, you already mentioned some of those erratic events, really high rainfall events. For instance, in Amazon at the moment, we have a record drought. It was never heard of, right? And that kind of comes because of these sort of circulation systems that seem to be affected by El Nino plus climate change to an extent that has never been there before. When we deal with climate change, what we know is we're dealing with interrelated factors, and that makes it so difficult. So that we have to bring into account that what you already said, increase of temperature, elevated emissions of climate relevant trace gases, and we have precipitation effects. All of these kind of things, they have to be taken into account. And on top of it, we are dealing with soil degradation, salinity problems, right? That aggravates the whole situation. And we have even population increase. It means what that basically means is that the fertile land per person to produce food is getting smaller and smaller. Okay, we need to then find ways to actually utilize that fertile soil we have for the food production for an ever increasing population, even. And that is why it's so important to have the Atoms for Food initiative of the IAEA. And well, what I hope that I can give you some examples very soon, but before I'll do that, um, climate change events, catastrophic events have happened in the past for human beings. And it's actually quite interesting. I think probably one of the biggest events, the most catastrophic human event happened in the year 1815. There was a temporal eruption, and that caused in 1816 a kind of year without summer. That was actually quite interesting. They had huge problems. That was a global event. People were trying to go from one country to the next, only to find out that it was the same problem, right? The Europeans went to America, hoping that it was better there, but it wasn't better there because it was a global event. That's exactly what we're dealing with now. And you introduced me nicely that I'm coming from Gießen. That's actually called the Justus Liebig University. And Justus Liebig is probably one of their key agrochemists in the 19th century. He became professor in Gießen in the year 1824. Why am I saying that? He was at the age of 21, very young professor, and he came exactly from this kind of tempora event 10 years ago. And that has happened, or that had an effect over 10 years. And he said, listen, we need to understand how plants are growing. We need to understand how we can deal with food security. He wasn't mentioning the word food security, but that is exactly what he was dealing with. And he was the first coming up with fertilizer. Urea, for instance, was sort of developed in our laboratories in Gießen. Superphosphate was developed in our laboratories in Gießen. Urea, as you know, is probably the nitrogen fertilizer in the world used solely in rice production and these sort of things. You see, and that was a kind of solution to things. And that sort of also happened later on, or that kind of brought us to the Green Revolution after the Second World War. I mean, of course, we had the crops, we had the breeding conditions, but also the fertilizer that actually helped to actually bring crop production to that level we needed to feed an ever-increasing population. Now the problem came because we sort of realized that we have feed problems. You know, we're actually generating a lot of nitrous oxide and a lot of greenhouse gases from agriculture, which is causing global warming and has a feedback, a negative feedback on our systems, on our agro-ecosystems. And that is where this climate smart agricultural technique comes in. Well, we in Gießen, we actually say, well, I mean, if you look at biology, these kind of systems are slow moving systems. That means we may not feel things now, but we have to react to something, what's happening in the future. And that is why we are actually dealing in Gießen. We have one of those longest running climate change platforms, so-called FACE facility, free carbon dioxide enrichment, where we can set climate to something that's going to happen in the middle of the century. That means we are getting data of the future. And for us, that's actually quite important because we're not just dealing with modeling, we're dealing with hardcore science, hardcore measurements. That is where nuclear techniques come in. For instance, we are fumigating with the carbon dioxide that comes from fossil fuels, you know, that has a very low carbon 13 signature, and it has almost no 14C signature in here. That means with this carbon, we can sort of trace this into the ecosystem and see, do we, for instance, get enhanced carbon sequestration, carbon storage in the soil? All of these are techniques that are sort of developed in connection with the IAEA. Okay. Very important remark. Absolutely. Absolutely. That means our systems are now running for 25 years, and we actually know that processes are changing. For instance, we know that climate relevant trace gases, the processes, are very important. If we, for instance, want to derive targeted mitigation options, we need to know where these climate relevant trace gases come from. We can, of course, measure the total amount of climate relevant trace gases, but when we are dealing with the processes, we are relying on stable isotopes and nuclear techniques developed by the IAEA. That is what we try to make sure or convince people that the IAEA is not just for nuclear energy, but it's actually for all of these agricultures. It is safe and secure. Stable isotopes, all of us are sort of affected by stable isotopes, and that do not really matter. The thing is, in the FIO IAEA Center, you already mentioned that, there's a lot of work going on with breeding, with irradiation, and things like that. And it's very, very important. What we are dealing with, and I think you already hinted this, with the soil. The soil is the key to understand the reaction of climate change and on productive ecosystems. And that is what we try to understand, the elemental cycles, uh, kind of turnover of nitrogen, of phosphorus, of carbon. All of these we would not be able to do without stable isotope facilities. That is why I think it's so important to have this program visible. I'm quite happy you mentioned that we need partners. right? And I mean, we're sort of an academic partner to you, right? And what we're going to have from next year onwards is sort of even a more closer relationship via a collaborating center, which will help a Liebig Center for Agroecology and Climate Impact Research, where we're dealing exactly with these kind of measures, with these kind of methodologies. And we hope that we can kind of bring this up even more obviously. And of course, industry partners are quite important, where we're actually working together with as well. And then, of course, funding comes in. I mean, it has to go all hand in hand. Where we are usually doing basic science, but I mean, the important bit, what we realize is we have to translate this basic science onto the stakeholder level, onto the farmers, onto those people who will actually have to deal with this one. They do not need to understand stable isotopes, but they need to get from us the knowledge which we get from stable isotopes or from nuclear techniques. And that is what we hope that we can actually foster much more prominently than what happened actually before. And I'm really looking forward to this one, so that we can kind of bring networks together, that we can connect. And let's hope how it will be. And we're quite hopeful to have all of these people connected here.
Thank you very much, Professor Muller. Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much. So we have our last panelist, and perhaps is a very challenging position, because we have discussed already an holistic perspective about the topic of our discussion. We have understood as well the role of development institutions and financial institutions, the importance of South-South. We keep referring to this idea of partnerships, and perhaps using that last input on the partnerships is the question to our last panelist, Director Martin Krauser, is on what is specific actions. I mean, in the framework of the 2030 agenda, but also connecting food and security with the agriculture agenda to climate change adaptation. What is the specific actions of the International Atomic Energy Agency could do, and how this could be operational and materialized? Is a very challenging one, but I'm sure you're gonna have an answer for that. Over to you.
I will try, Miguel, and I want to say thank you to my fellow panelists for talking so knowledgeably about this subject. We are sitting here in the blue zone. There's also a green zone. But the real action of the COP is happening at the main negotiation center, the rooms there, where the delegates are discussing the big climate agenda. I don't know if you are following some of those discussions, but if you have heard about the Loss and Damage Fund. The Loss and Damage Fund was created as an idea last year at the COP. This year, or between last year and this year, it was operationalized. And at the beginning of this COP, just 3 days ago, the financial pledges have been made. Hundreds of millions have been pledged to the Loss and Damage Fund by different countries. What does it mean? First, it means that there is a recognition that there is a need for a fund dealing with losses and damages. You think about that. We are talking about losses of lives. We are talking about damage to infrastructure related to climate change. Exactly. So that countries are putting hundreds of millions in a loss and damage fund, recognition that climate is not a scientific phenomenon happening in the abstract. It is something that is already here, and financial resources have been made available to deal with, the damage control, you could say, almost. Now, this is good news, right? We could say there are hundreds of millions now available in the loss and damage fund. There are other financial facilities available: the Climate Adaptation Fund, the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facility. there are other financial instruments available to finance climate adaptation action. Miguel, I'm coming to answer your question about action, activities. What is it that's happening? But I need to draw this broader pictures here. So there are financial resources available. There is a great need to help farmers to adapt to climatic conditions that they have never experienced before. Drought tolerant crops is something that was mentioned, for example. Now, the big challenge that I see from my perspective, where I sit as a director in the International Atomic Energy Agency in the Technical Cooperation Department, is how do we get from the science with the money that is out there to do meaningful projects, to transfer that knowledge using the money that is there, using the experiences from Liebig Center or academic research institute, to transfer that to, in our case, it would be to the farmers, let's say. We're talking about food and agriculture here. How can we find a mechanism to transfer with the money, the knowledge that we have to the ultimate beneficiaries whose livelihoods are damaged, who experiences losses in income that has consequences for their families? That is, as far as I can see, the challenge that we have. Now, having painted that picture, the IAEA, through the Technical Cooperation Program, has a mechanism to do exactly that, what I'm talking about. And that is, we are working in 146 countries around the world, doing capacity building in those areas that we are talking about. We are transferring that knowledge to those stakeholders, to those counterparts, to those institutions in the South that do need that. I give you an example. We have, for example, a project in Namibia. Namibia, you know, is a very arid country, and they're struggling with increasing droughts. Even, you know, for Namibia, who's traditionally already an arid country, it's an additional challenge. So drip irrigation is a conventional technique that is being used, you know, in dryland countries. But how to measure exactly the moisture that a plant needs to use drip irrigation successfully is a big challenge. And here's where we come in. We have isotopic cosmic ray technologies that are being rolled out. They sound very fancy, and sometimes they are very fancy. Not only the name. I mean, there is serious science and even equipment that is needed behind this. But through our project and technical cooperation program with Namibia, we have worked with them to build the capacity in the laboratories in Namibia that are linked to the agricultural extension center and programs that they have there. These are all national programs. These are not driven, you know, by us or by anybody from the north. To help them to learn how to use those isotopic techniques to deploy drip irrigation more efficiently. And this has saved so much water. Water is the most scarce resource in Namibia for the farmers, obviously. It's just one example. Now, these type of examples we need to multiply. And for that reason, we have created, excuse me, we have created a new program, a global program on climate adaptation linked to food and agriculture. This new program is being rolled out starting in January next year, over 4 years, compared to what the Islamic Development Bank is doing. And as you have mentioned some financial figures, ours is very modest, I would say, 3.9 million over a period of 4 years. You can see, but we believe it will have a significant impact around the world. Why? Because we are using that money to build capacity in countries like Namibia, in Vietnam, in many countries, to to learn and deploy isotopic nuclear techniques to address those climatic adaptation issues related to food and agriculture. That is our mission. That's what we are going to do over the next 4 years through this new global adaptation program that we are doing together with the colleagues from Nuclear Application Department. And we are using technical cooperation as a mechanism to transfer such knowledge, including procurement, by the way. You know, laboratories, they need instruments, they need procurement, they need equipment. It's not only capacity building, it's hardware also. We're doing that as well. We are transferring hardware as well through our procurement. So that roughly is an answer. I hope, Miguel. By the way, just let me mention this in closing. The IAEA has not started yesterday working on those topics. We have counted, actually, we have done an inventory internally. We have more than 400 projects, both on the research side, but also on technical cooperation projects, more than 400 that are linked to climate adaptation issues, to water issues, to sustainable soil management issues. So more than 400. So we have already a body of experience in our own organizations, but we want to partner with financial institutions and others to upscale it and to roll it out at a grand scale. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you very much. We have 10 minutes to finish our event, and yes, you respond the question, Martin. So and it was a very challenging one. Perhaps because I'm coming here representing also the partnership building and resource mobilization team. I'm very touched by the input from each of the panelists from a partnership building perspective. I would like to conclude the session today by remembering a quote that I normally use from Helen Keller, that she said that alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. And I think that this sentiment perfectly captures some of the spirits of this collaborative process that is bringing us not only this discussion, but also for the Atoms for Climate pavilion. Each contribution, no matter what, small, or what is the source of that contribution, adds to our collective capacity to build resilient food and water systems in the face of the climate change that we were discussing. But I don't want to be the one that is giving the last conclusion. But I would like to ask our panelists, perhaps a quote, perhaps a sentence, or one specific action, or even a word that eventually could resonate on how we can move forward on this. So perhaps, TDJ, you would like to start, or you like to conclude, and we start the other way around.
Whatever you
So,
okay.
Martin, perhaps is another challenge. One word, one action, one thought from the discussion.
Yeah, I maybe one thought in closing from my side would be at this stage where we are on the global picture of dealing with the climatic damages. I would say we cannot afford to not use all the techniques and technologies that are available to us. And some people, they have problems embracing nuclear techniques and technologies because we are saying nuclear and they think it's something dangerous. Now, I would say it's more dangerous to continue let climate change happen and not to adapt quickly. It's more dangerous than anything else. So my closing thought is this. We don't have the luxury anymore to pick and choose technologies that we like, that we don't like. We need to embrace all of them. And that includes nuclear techniques that need to work alongside conventional technologies. The drip irrigation example that I gave is one example. Drip irrigation is a conventional technology that has nothing to do with nuclear. But if you combine it with cosmic ray sensor to measure soil content, water content, humidity content in the soil, then you have a powerful package. And that is my closing thought on the topic.
Yeah. Professor Muller?
Okay. When I started with why am I actually doing some work with the IAEA? I think if you talk about climate change, and you see that here on this 28, there are so many institutions, there are so many facilities, there are so many things dealing with climate change. And some of these institutions that do similar things. What is unique in the IAEA that they have a methodology that could be used by a lot of institutions. And I think the keyword is networking. We do not need perhaps another new research institution, but we need to bring that what is already available together so that we can have synergy effects. And I think this is the key. And that is why I really like this kind of new idea of that you actually start partnering, that you actually start opening up perhaps to industry, to other partners, to academia, to things like Islamic Development Bank. I think that's the absolute key. That we bring expertise together, network, and bring synergy effects on the ground.
Toriba?
Well, thank you so much. Look, I think doing nothing is an option. Is not an option. We have to do something, um, and I think I see it as a two kind of a parallel kind of a action. One is innovation in terms of technologies. Other one is innovation to mobilize finances. So we need both innovations to make things work. I'm very glad to hear that there's a lot of innovations are already in place. However, they need financing. So for financing also needs innovation because the development needs of our member countries, as you know, that SDGs by 2030, forget about achieving it. Because of COVID, about 50 million people in our member countries have fallen under the poverty line. We would not be able to achieve SDGs. So we need innovation. And this particular innovation, what I'm talking about, is where we partner with the private sector, not only the MDBs. If you look at it, the private sector has not come in as much in providing the finances for development as we would like them to come in. So, as you know, that the gap to fill the SDG is almost $1 trillion per year or more. So we need this financial innovation, which we are working. For example, we have in the last couple of years we have issued about a $1 billion green bond, and that bond raised about €1 billion, more than $1 billion. Then that was followed by 2 billion sustainability bond, which we issued. So we are working on doing our part. We are doing financial innovation. I think it's a natural partnership to with knowledge, with the research, and with the technology, and hopefully together we could solve the problems of the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the last conclusion, Deputy Director General.
Thank you, Miguel. Really enjoyed the discussion, and what came out really clearly that there is a problem and we need to work together to address it. And there is no choice. The problem is here and it's well known. Now, the question is why the IA is here. It's this stigma about nuclear. And I always say, don't be afraid of nuclear. Just try to understand it. And once you understand it, come closer and then let's work together, bring what you are good at and let's work together, because this is how we will contribute our part. I'm not saying that the nuclear is the solution, but nuclear is definitely part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody, for attending us. And besides the logistics, I think that we have an amazing discussion. Thank you very much, the panelists and everybody. Thank you.